Jeff here, and today I'm going to be showing you step by step how to replace the front and rear brakes and rotors on a 2004 Honda Odyssey. These procedures are the same for 1999 through 2004 Honda Odysseys.
We'll start off by loosening up the lug nuts. Here I'm using a crossbar. Gives you a lot of leverage. I like this bar. You can use a socket, or if you're going to use an air gun, then you can do this once the vehicle's jacked up. Doesn't have to be on the ground. Before I jack the vehicle up, always making sure I chock my back wheels if I'm raising the front. Showing you here how you want to put the jack on the frame, making sure that you're on a solid metal surface to raise the vehicle. And then jack your vehicle up. As you're jacking the vehicle, you want to get the tire off the ground. You don't have to get it really high in the air, just enough that the bottom of the tire is not touching the ground. Most vehicles have a spot where you can put your jack stand. This vehicle has two locations, one on the right and the left. You'll see there. I'm putting the jack stand on the one on the right. It doesn't really matter either one. Getting it as high as I can, and then I'm going to lower the vehicle onto the jack stand. And now I need to take the lug nuts the rest of the way out. I'm using my hand. That's just my personal preference, but you can use a socket wrench as well. Of course, if you have an air gun, that makes the job really fast. Take the tire off and set it aside. Then take some penetrating lubricant and spray it into the retaining screws that hold the rotor in place. We're going to let this sit for a little while and work while we take off the rest of the brake hardware. Next, we have the retaining bolts on the brake caliper. There's one at the top and one at the bottom. Those are both 12mm sockets. There are three methods for taking bolts out that have a fair bit of torque on them. The first one's using an air gun. That is the simplest way to do it. Comes out in seconds. The other way that's common is using a breaker bar like I am here to start it, to get it loosened up, and then coming back in with a socket wrench and loosening it the rest of the way. The other way is just trying it with a socket wrench. I can tell you from personal experience, you're going to be doing a lot of pulling if you do that, because it is pretty difficult to get those bolts out. Now I'm just taking them out the rest of the way by hand. With the bolts out, it's time to remove the caliper. Takes a little bit of wiggling sometimes, especially if it's been on there for quite a while. But you can just wiggle it by hand. You don't need to tap on it with a hammer or use anything else to get it loose. Just wiggle it loose by hand. Be very careful because the brake line is attached, and you do not want to put a lot of pressure on that brake line. So you can see I'm taking a bungee cord, and I'm going to just take that and bungee it up onto one of the coils on the strut just to hold it. And that brake line there that I showed you, you want to be very careful to make sure there's no tension on that. Next, taking off the mounting bolts for the caliper mounting hardware. It's hard to see in this video, but there's a bolt just inside the bolt that we removed for the caliper itself. I'm using a breaker bar. There's one on the top, there's one on the bottom. They're held on with almost 70 foot-pounds of pressure. So just using a regular socket wrench is going to be pretty difficult to get it off. An air gun would make this much, much faster. I have an air gun. I'm just showing you in this video how you can do it. If you do not have an air gun, it's still possible. Backing up the bolts out now with the socket wrench, and then they come out the rest of the way by hand. With the bolts out, the caliper mounting hardware just pulls right off. Now I'm showing you the old brake pad. You can see As I'm pointing it out, there is hardly anything left of this pad. It is wafer thin and pretty dangerous. This is it compared to the new pad, and you can see how much is on the new pad compared to the old pad. Now I need to remove the retaining screws that are holding on the rotor, their Phillips head. This is one method to use, which is taking a number 3 Phillips bit, using my socket, putting the Phillips bit inside a 1/4 inch socket to hold it, and then putting a fair amount of pressure on it and backing the screw out. It worked on this screw, but you're going to see on my next one, I work on it, and it's just stripping it out. It will not turn. Stripped it out so much so that I ended up needing to drill it out. So when you're drilling out the retaining bolt, you're going to start off with a pilot hole with a smaller bit, and you're going to work your way up to a 1/4 inch bit. I'm not going to show the whole drilling process because it took about 10 minutes to drill it out, but I'm just working back and forth between a small bit and a 1/4 inch bit, trying to get the head to pop off. And there it is. Finally got it off. The main part of the bolt is still inside the hole. So I take a punch and I'm going to start working on that. Even though I could take the rotor off right now, I decided I'm going to go ahead and start working on it. So I start punching on it using a hammer and a small punch. To be honest, this punch was a little too thin. I ended up bending the punch out and ruining it. Here I decided to go ahead and take off the rotor. So the rotor is stuck on there pretty well. You have to get it loose. Just take a little, if you're not keeping the rotor like I'm not, you can take a regular hammer and just tap around the sides. If you're going to keep the rotor, if you're having your rotors turned, then use a rubber mallet. Then I'm back to working on the bolt by punching it, drilling it, trying to get it loose. This took another 10 minutes working on this. The importance of it is you don't want to have any part of the bolt protruding at least out of the front side so that it doesn't scrape against the rotor. You don't have to take the bolt completely out, but if you ever want to put another retaining screw bolt in, you're going to have to. So there you see it. I finally got it out. Now I'm going to take a brass brush and brush off all the lugs. The lugs got a bunch of metal shavings on them, and I don't want to have those metal shavings on the lug when I go to put the lug nuts back on when I mount the tire. So I'm just brushing all that off, being non-abrasive to it. And for good measure, I decided, there's a little bit of rust on those. I'll just go ahead and brush them out with the brush while I got this apart. Putting the new rotor on now. There's tapered holes, 2 of them, that line up with where the retaining screws go. I put one of those back in because I had it. You don't have to put retaining screws in because when you mount your wheel, it will hold the rotor in place. But if you've got it, go ahead and stick it back in. Now, the caliper hardware have retaining clips for the brake pads. They're little shims. So you take the old ones out and put the new ones in. There was a side-by-side comparison of the 2. And there are the 2 new ones that go 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Putting the new retaining clip back in. Sometimes it can be a little tricky. You got to maneuver it around, get it to fit just right. There it is. You can see the old one next to it. There is with all of the new hardware installed, all 4 points. Most new brakes come with some type of anti-seize lubricant. If you did not get some with your brakes, you'll want to pick some up at your local hardware store. It's better to not use regular grease and to use the anti-seize lubricant keeps the brakes from seizing up and causing excessive wear or making squeaking noises. Here you can see I've done all four, got them all lubricated up. Now mounting the mounting bracket back onto the car. You can hand tighten down the two retaining bolts first. Remember, those are 14mm bolts. Once you get them hand tightened, then you can take your torque wrench, tighten it up the rest of the way, and torque it to specifications. From my vehicle, it is 69.7 foot-pounds for the mounting bolts. Sometimes you have to maneuver around a little bit and find the best place to push or pull, because you do have limited space back behind there. And that's why I switched my location here. It was easier to push down on it to get it to go to the right torque. Now I'm taking anti-seize lubricant and putting it on the outside parts of the brake pads that have the metal shim on the outside. Putting it all the way around, making all the metal points of contact lubricated so that the caliper doesn't seize up on it. Before we press in the caliper to get the new brake pads on, I'm going to open up the brake reservoir, the brake fluid reservoir, and show you that I have ample room there for pressing in the caliper. As I press in the caliper, it's going to push fluid back up through the reservoir, and we don't want to overflow the reservoir. So I'm removing the bungee cord and showing you here that the caliper is going to get pushed in. To do this, the easiest way with my C-clamp that I have is to take a board or a piece of wood and put the C-clamp over that, and it will provide a level, equal distribution point for pushing pressure on the caliper. If you don't press your caliper in, you're not going to get the caliper to go over the new pads, because the new pads are much thicker than the old pads. So you have to get that caliper pressed all the way down in order for it to fit back over the brake pads. Now you can see the caliper has been pressed in all the way flat. And the brake reservoir fluid did fill up a little bit, but not enough where I needed to remove any brake fluid. I'm going to attach the top retaining bolt for the caliper so that it will be ready to put on once I get the brake pads on. I'm gonna just hand tighten it down, and then I use a bungee cord to hold it up. I've already got the outside brake pad sit into the shims, and it took quite a bit of finagling and moving around to get it in. Now I'm going to show you putting in the inside brake pad. But I had so much trouble with getting it in with those shims that I popped the new shims out. And I'm going to put the old shims back in. For whatever reason, I don't know why, but these shims for this vehicle on the front brake pads were not working. Even though they looked almost identical, they just would not go in. I spent roughly 30 minutes trying to get that inside brake pad to go into the new shims with no success. So what I did is I cleaned up the old shims and put some anti-seize lubricant on them, and now I'm going to put the new pad in. When you're putting your pads on, be careful to do your best not to touch the inside or the outside of the pads until you're kind of squeezing it in there. But definitely never touch the inside of the pad. You don't want to get any grease or anti-seize lubricant on the pad itself. I'm working fairly hard here trying to get that pad to go in. You can see me tapping on it with a hammer. Not the best idea, but I'm just barely tapping on it just to try to get a little bit more force than I could with my hand. Rubber mallet would be a good idea, I guess, instead of a regular hammer. But you can see me struggling with it, even with the new shims. I've never had a vehicle that I've worked on the disc brakes with that were this difficult to put on. And they're finally seated. And there you can see they're all pressed in right up against the rotor. Now I can flip down the caliper, put in the bottom retaining bolt by hand, and then take my torque wrench and torque it to spec. On my vehicle, it is 20 foot-pounds for the top and the bottom bolt. With the caliper back on, last step, need to put the wheel back on. So just line up your holes with your lugs, pick it up, and put it on. Then take one of your lug nuts and put it on, and just to hold it once it gets on there, tighten it down by hand. Once you get one of them on a little bit, then it's not going to move on you, and you can put the rest of them in by hand. Then I take my T-bar just to tighten it up the rest of the way until it's just snug. With the car in the air, you can't tighten it all the way down. You can do this with a socket as well. Then I need to lift my car back up off the jack stand so I can lower the vehicle. So I lift up my jack, pull my jack stand, and let the vehicle all the way down. With the vehicle's pressure now pushing down on the tire, I can torque it down to spec. For my vehicle, it's the same as the caliper mounting hardware. It's 79.6 foot-pounds for each lug. New brakes, you have to break them in with a break-in period per manufacturer specification, so follow that. And then before you do that, make sure you pump your brake pedal a few times to push fluid back into the line so your brakes are responsive. There are a few small differences between the front and the rear rotors and brakes, so I'm going to show you some of those differences now. After I had done the front brakes, I decided to go to the store and get an adapter for my impact gun so I could take the retaining screws off the back rotors much easier. You can see how fast that was. That came out in about 2 seconds. I sprayed some penetrating lubricant on the screws first to try to loosen them up. But as you'll watch on the next one too, I'll put the bit in there and it backs right out. So I suggest this method if you have an impact gun. The front and the rear brakes are slightly different. The rear brakes are smaller, and as I'm showing you here, the inside rear brake has a wear indicator on it, and that's the big piece of metal that's protruding at the bottom there on the right. And what that does is as your pad wears down, it makes a screeching noise on your rotor to let you know that your pads are getting really low. Amazingly, these rear brake pads are the original from the vehicle, from Honda, even says Honda right on the brake pad, and the vehicle has 219,000 miles, and there's still almost half of the brake pad left. So it's only in rare instances where you may have some type of problem with your rear suspension system that you may end up with some uneven wear and need to replace your rear brake pads and rotors. Mine were in good condition, but since I had already had it opened up and taken apart, I decided I'd go ahead and replace them. The brake pads themselves on the rear also have shims on the outside of the pads that pop off. I'm showing you those shims there. Depending on the brand of replacement brakes that you purchase, you may need to take those shims and put them on the new brake pads. You'll want to clean them up first with some brake parts cleaner and then put some anti-seize lubricant on them. The old rotor, after I took it off, it has a rubber plug on it. That rubber plug needs to be taken out and transferred over to the new rotor. So I just put it down on the ground there, used a flathead screwdriver and pried it out. And then it will go back in by hand, just pressing it back in. Now it's time to take the new rotor and put it back on. Just like the front ones, there are some recessed holes, tapered holes, that are going to line up to where the retaining screws go onto the wheel assembly. So take those, line it up, and then just push it on. Take the retaining screws, you can tighten them down by hand first, and then just take a large headed Phillips screwdriver, the largest one you have, and tighten them down by hand. Now there are pins that are on the caliper mounting hardware and they just pull out. And I forgot to show this to you on the front brakes even though I did it, but I wanted to show you on the rear brakes at least. You take that pin and you clean it off and then you put some new lubricant on it. I like to use my copper anti-seize lubricant. Putting a medium layer on it, not thin but not super thick. Then just take the pin, stick it back in, make sure the rubber sheath around it comes up to it. As you can see there, it's all pressed in. Now it moves really nice and smooth. I already did the bottom one there. I didn't show mounting the caliper mounting hardware back on, but I put it back on to torque specs. Same as the front, 79.6 pounds per foot. Now I'm taking the old shims off. These are a little different. These are one piece for the bottom, one piece for the top, not split apart into 4 separate pieces like the front brakes were. Actually makes it a little easier to work with. And the new hardware looks identical to the old hardware. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and try to use the new hardware, since it is always recommended to replace your old hardware with new hardware. They just pop right back in. You can see how quick I put in the bottom one, and same for the top. And here's a side-by-side comparison of the new brake pad on the left and the old one on the right. Taking my anti-seize lubricant and putting it on the outside of the brake pad. I like, again, to use my copper anti-seize. And I'm also going to be putting it on the shims as well. You can do this before you install the shims into the caliper mounting assembly. I just find it a little more clean to do it this way so I don't smudge it all up and the anti-seize lubricant stays on. Now putting in the pads, easiest way to do it is to level it up where both of them, the top and the bottom, are equal distance from the outside of the shim, and then just kind of push it in together. And now I'm going to be pressing in the caliper, which is a little bit different on the rear one. It's a smaller caliper and allows me to not have to use a piece of wood as a brace to push against. I was able to line it up and push the caliper back in, and I noticed on the rear caliper that it pushes in easier than it was on the front calipers. Putting anti-seize lubricant on the inside pad, the one with the wear indicator. The wear indicator that I pointed out there is going to go on the bottom. Just line it up, and that one pushed in a little easier than the other side, but both of them went in pretty fast. Now I can lower my caliper down over the brake pads, and I can hand tighten up that bottom bolt and torque them to spec, which is the same as the front ones, which is 20 foot-pounds. And that's about it. Just put the wheel back on, torque it down to spec at 79.6 foot-pounds, and you've completed the project. If you have any questions or comments about working on your brakes, leave them in the comment section below.
Another DIY Jeff project complete. If you like this video, click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, DIY Jeff, for more DIY projects. Also, click the bell icon next to the subscribe button and you'll get notified every time I upload a new video.